All the corvettes were named after cities and towns. Of course, Regina, Saskatchewan, Weyburn. I was sent to train as an ERA apprentice. The ERA is a rating that runs the engines on the ship. When you're at sea, he's on the throttle. Any repair work or maintenance, minor maintenance work, he can't do too much. He's responsible for all that, you know. It was a 20 or 21 month apprenticeship. There's a lot to learn about an engine room. And we took side courses in electricity and chemistry and mathematics and stuff like that. But you had to know every pipe, every valve in an engine room, and there's lots of them. There was over 100 of us fellas together, and they give us a choice. You could go on the baby flat tops, we're out at the West Coast, or you could go on the coast boats. And I made a choice to go to Halifax, and there would be about 18 or 20 of us out of that group wanted to go to Halifax. And I was a fifth class ERA. That's the lowest rank of it. And I worked for 4 months in the dockyard. They had a gang of ERAs would do maintenance work on the Canadian corvettes that would come in and tie up for a few days. And I did a lot of work on there and worked in the machine shop. You were under the supervision of a chief. Later, got called into the chief's engineer's officer and said that they're quite satisfied with the work, and you being selected, it's a voluntary, but you've been selected to go to the Royal Navy, overseas to the Royal Navy for training on engine room turbines in cruisers. Well, that was I said, that's for me, you know. And I went overseas on the Empress of Scotland. And we went to Greenock, that's the Canadian Navy base in Scotland. And I wasn't there 12 hours till I was drafted to the Regina. I never got my training at the Royal Navy. They had to go to Canadian corvettes. There was 21 of them down there for the invasion. You see, this would be mid-May, somewhere in there, and in 1944. A lot was happening. A guy like me couldn't imagine it, you know. Particularly when you're in the engine room, you don't get any news. You just track at time. You go and you watch. You try to get something to eat and sleep, and that's it. But you got an occasional peek out, you know. And I'm pretty sure we were on a group that was circling the Warspite. There was several ships. We were just going around in great big circles, maybe a quarter of a mile or so off the Warspite to intercept any torpedo or anything like that. And I think that was D-Day +3. I think they were going pretty strong even then. Troops going over and different like landing craft and the likes of that. It was August the 8th, 1944. We had been for several weeks going up and down the English Channel on escort and convoy duties, all kinds of freighters going over to France. We picked up a convoy out of Cardiff, Wales, in the Bristol Channel. And we were heading like west towards Land's End, go around Land's End, and go over to Cherbourg, France. Well, we sailed all down the Bristol Channel that day. They're quite slow, these convoys. And about quarter to 9, maybe in there, somewhere in there. We felt a rumble in the water. So I just come off watch. I just washed my hands, felt that rumble. I was down in the mess. And I grabbed my life jacket, came up, and all kinds of our crew that were on watch or anything were on the quarterdeck, that's the rear, watching a freighter go down. And we stood there, and our ship was stopped, and we watched the freighter, Ezra Weston was the name of it, going down by the bow. And as the angle got sharper, all the deck cargo started rolling off. Trucks, cars, jeeps, what a sight to see, And we were not standing too far off her. There's a leading seaman, Malone, on there. He was in the group watching the activity, the ship, the freighter sinking, and I didn't know where to go, so I stood by what would be my action station, which was a telephone on the bulkhead. Malone came over and lifted up the bulk off the phone, and it was direct to the bridge. Requested permission to set the depth charge safe. There would be about 6 depth charges. And he went over there and he did something on the end of them and set them safe. Was not hardly a minute or two after that, the torpedo hit us. And that's when the ship blew up, went in the air, I guess, and landed in the water. Had he not done that, we'd all been dead. Those depth charges would have went off right underneath us. And have you ever seen a depth charge go off? They tremendous explosions, yeah. So we tried to get him some recognition for what he did. We thought he should have the Victoria Cross, but we didn't. Couldn't get it. They said he was just doing his job. Malone, of course, died. He's buried in Padstock in Cornwall. He was washed ashore about 3 days later. Less than 30 seconds, the ship disappeared. It must have hit the ammunition locker and the boilers at the same time. Nobody got out of the engine room or the boiler room. They all died in there. 30 didn't come back. I was on the quarterdeck there, and I remember the great white sheet, and I didn't hear anything. And the next thing I knew, in the water, considerable. The ship had gone. A lot of fellas died from hypothermia. I was not far from it myself. I didn't know at the time, but I was hanging on to a Carly float, and the water was bitter cold. And and after a considerable length of time, I felt sort of comfortable, And I said to the fellow beside me, "We must have got into a warm stream of water." "Yeah," he says, "I think it feels good." And I felt, and then I was going to go to sleep, And he says, "No, Don, we can't go to sleep. No, don't go to sleep." If I had went to sleep, that would be the end of me. An American tank landing craft coming back from France. So we had, on our life jackets, we had little orange helmets, toques, with a light in it, the battery in here. And they could see all the little lights. So they come picked us all up. They're not very maneuverable, and it took quite a while to pick us all up. And we were all black with oil, And they tried to get it off us. An officer from the freighter come over to me, and he opened up a club bag, and all I had on was my overalls that I'd been wearing in my watch on the engine room. And I dropped that and I stand there naked. And he gave me a big white towel and says, wipe yourself down as well as you can. You know, which I did. And he digs into his club bag, brings out a pair of long woolen winter long johns, you know, and they comes out with a couple of woolen stockings, and then he takes off his coat. And it was a big winter coat, like, you know, and reached down below my knees and made me put that on. And there was an Air Force station not far from where they landed us on the Cornwall coast. There was trucks and everything waiting for us. And they took us to maybe a couple of miles to this Air Force place. The only regret I had was the fellas that I lost, some good friends. You know, they 30 of them. There's quite a few. And never saw them again. Yeah. Even the guy that relieved me less than a half an hour before in the engine room, he died too. I think there's a dozen or so of us were okay to go home. We're in good enough physical condition to go home. I was very fortunate myself. Just had lacerations around the face and a sore hip. And here, lo and behold, it's a Queen Mary. They're putting us on the Queen Mary. Oh boy, this is going to be something. And I had a nice cabin on the A deck, and I thought, this is strange. Where, you know, the ratings all go down below, you know. Anyway, we were there a couple of days, and this evening about supper time, there's a big commotion down on the dock. All these big limousine-type cars come up, and people getting out of them and coming on the Queen Mary. And lo and behold, Churchill gets out of one of the cars. We all recognized him right away. Everybody recognized him. This was a special trip for Churchill and his staff coming out to the Second Quebec Conference in September '44. And Churchill and his staff were no sooner on the Queen Mary than it took off. And it went all up the docks, all kinds of ships, passengers and everything. This was a big port, and all blowing their horns and saluting the Queen Mary. That's the senior ship in the fleet. Anyway, they take off and we head for Halifax. It took 4.5 days. But every afternoon, just after lunch, we were the only people on the Queen Mary, except Churchill and his staff. Every afternoon for 4.5 days, Churchill and his daughter come out on the promenade deck, which was roped off just for them. And he'd give us a V for victory and like good day or good morning. And he doffed his cap, I remember once, always a big cigar. And we saw him every day. All the survivors were invited by the Navy out to the commissioning. It's up alongside the jetty, the brand new Regina. The politicians were all up on the platform, but we were all up in seat benches. Anyway, they went through this pretty formal ceremony, and the crew were all marched on. A couple of admirals were making the speeches and, you know, and stuff like that. I don't remember them smashing a bottle or anything. But anyway, then we all went back to the hotel, and they had a real big banquet. I always remember that because I was asked to say grace. Yeah, so I felt pretty good about that. We all went out just after dinner and went on the Regina to give us Regina baseball caps, you know. In fact, the skipper handed them out. He had a great big box of them. And we headed out into the bay, and that was for about 3 hours. And I was being accompanied by the chief ERA, and he took me my son and I, every place, even in the engine room. Nobody else got in the engine room except my son and I. The crew still comes to Regina every once in a while. For example, the crew came, you got the keys to the city or freedom of the city, and we were invited down there for that. The ship's company was there, and Doug Archer was the mayor then, and the Doug Archer and I cut the ceremonial cake. It was the commanding officer's ceremonial sword. When we cut the cake, all the blade was covered with icing, and of course they couldn't get it back in the scabbard. And the last I remember was some of the ladies that had been with the cake were busy trying to clean this icing off.